Welcome to KGPT's Wichita's Biz That Is. I'm Tim Witzman, president of the Wichita Independent Business Association, sometimes known as WIBA. And I have a friend with me today, and a longtime WIBA member, John Lay from George Lay Signs.
Hello.
Good to see you again. People are always interested in the background, so kind of tell me where you started and the path that got you to where you are now.
Okay. I think I could say I was born into the sign business. My dad started the business a few years before I was born. His background was he was an old hand lettering guy. He had had a lot of natural art talent, but could do hand lettering and patterns and various things for the signs.
Now, did you inherit that talent?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
So the art talent went to my sister. so I don't have that. But he had worked for a couple other sign companies here in town, and then started out on his own in the probably around 1954. Mm-hmm.
But you're originally from Wichita?
I grew up here. I tell people that I've made two significant moves in my lifetime. One, I spent 4 years at KU going to school, and then when I was about 35, I moved from the west side of town to the east side of town. So those were my big moves. So.
All right. Well, we don't have the long history there then.
Okay.
So did you join the business right out of college, or did you
Yes,
do
I
some
did.
other things? Okay. Mm-hmm. And
So.
what were you doing when you started?
Well, when I came into the business at a interesting time. I graduated from school in '79, which was right when our largest customers at that time were companies with gas stations and convenience stores, and gas prices were just crossing the $1 mark. And every gas price sign in the country was now obsolete because they were only designed for 2 digits of pricing. So we've probably had 3 or 4 years where it seems like all we did was was gas price signs and getting them converted with new numbers.
Good for
and
business.
New faces. It was a great run. So
And that's what you began.
So I thought I was going to be out selling signs and stuff, and instead I ended up on the production side helping get stuff out the door. So
Well, that was useful though, to learn the business.
had a lot of interesting experiences. So
What all kinds of signs are you into? Because that's become a much more complicated thing these days.
well, our primary focus is basically signs for businesses. So it would be the on-site signs, the sign that would be out in front of a business, or signs
not the
on their
billboards.
walls. We also have a operation with billboards, but the on-site signs probably make up about 75% of our business, and the billboards are about 25%. So they're two very different parts of the business, but we we do both.
Okay. Did you study business in college?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So.
Tell me about the difference between what you studied and what business is really like.
It's been long enough now, it's kind of hard to remember what I studied. But I think it was, I almost think that if I went back and reviewed what I did or went through the school now, a lot more of the concepts in the business school would make more sense now, having been in the business than they did at the time I was studying and preparing to go in. Because there wasn't a whole lot. When you go through case studies from the Harvard Business School, they don't have a lot of bearing on a 20-employee small business. Mm-hmm. So, and I think a lot of what at that time, I don't think there was much emphasis on small businesses and the business programs. It was more preparing you for corporate America.
Yeah. Well, and then within the business, you've got kind of two pieces. You've got all businesses have certain commonalities, and what they have to deal with: personnel, finance, whatever.
Right.
But then the uniqueness of the sign business too. Mm-hmm. Are your personnel issues different from other people, or not? Do you think?
Generally not. I think it's
the
same issues of hiring good people, getting them trained, and we have. It's amazing how it is difficult to find good people. There are some of our minimum standards are that people have to have a driver's license, and it's amazing at how many people will come through the door that don't have a driver's license.
Really?
So
That's surprising to me.
no. Now they go back out and get in their car and drive off, but they don't have a driver's license. So.
Well, that's not the most encouraging word I've heard today, John.
Well,
Are you able to retain people for good time?
we have a lot of long-term employees. I can't reel off any stats, but I know we have a lot of people that have been with us 10 years and more. So.
What do you think are the keys to keeping people?
I think having treating them fairly, I guess, would be the way to sum it up.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have to have a competitive pay and benefits package.
Right.
But I think also just being understanding of
Circumstances?
of their circumstances, trying to accommodate them on different things.
Do you find people are different now? The people you're hiring or trying to hire now, are they any different than they were 20 years ago?
Oh, there's a lot of generational differences. So I think one thing I can see with people that we will, and especially younger people that we'll hire now, they are not interested in working they're not really interested in working extra hours.
Overtime.
They want to, their personal time and personal activities are very important to them, and we need to be mindful of that, or we're not going to retain our employees.
Okay.
So.
All right, we're going to take a little break, and we'll be back in just a moment with more of Wichita's Biz That Is. Welcome back to KGPT's Wichita's Biz That Is. I'm Tim Witzman, and our guest today, John Lay from George Lay Signs. And we've been talking about that business. Tell me some of the things that have changed in the business since you went to work there to today. What's different?
I think our customer base has changed tremendously. When I made reference earlier to a large part of our business at that time were for convenience stores and gas stations. And just the sheer number of places that sell gas is completely different than it was at that time. So there aren't nearly as many stations as there were back then. So I think of driving home at all the places that if I'd driven that route back in 1980, all the places I could have stopped to fill my tank with gas and have where they are now, and there's just probably over half of them are gone. So
yeah, I'm surprised. I've been in locations in other towns where it was hard to find any place.
It is, and of course years ago you thought of major intersection will have a gas station on at least two of the corners.
Right.
So that's been a large change. The whole model of the branded gas stations is, now a lot of the smaller stations and smaller operators have exited the market, and it's dominated by Quick Trip, Dillon's, and Kroger with their Quick Shop and Dillon's. We have a little bit of Phillips 66 and Conoco, but two of our largest customers in those years were Wichita-based Derby Refining and Vickers Petroleum, and both of those names are now part of Wichita history.
So your business has migrated then. If that was going away, what has come on?
We've broadened our base to do more general retail in the market. We probably do more work with banks and other financial institutions, just general retail. So we have a broader base of customers where we used to specialize. We had years where we probably had 75% of our business was for petroleum accounts, and that's no longer the case.
Well, I probably said something that wasn't good for your business once. Remember when Bank 4, was going through those series of, and they couldn't get the sign changed on the bank fast enough.
Right.
And I made the well, not terribly serious suggestion that they ought to put an Etch-a-Sketch up on top of the bank.
Well,
now it's been stable since
of course,
Bank
that
of
was
America
part
came.
of what was so good about petroleum accounts. With people, station might be Derby this year, and when the contract ran out a few years later, they might rebrand to Conoco or to APCO or something else. And as those changes were made, signs had to be changed each time. So,
well,
banks were good for that. Gas stations were good for that. There's a lot of different businesses that just by the way they go through a corporate re-imaging campaign and there's sign work there.
Yeah.
So
I should do truth in advertising. We used your company for the signs for WIBA at our 200 East First Street building.
I remember.
And they look good.
Thank you.
And people notice. I didn't used to notice that building. Now it's got that sign on it.
And that's interesting because years ago, an office building like that would have had very minimal signage. A lot of other businesses would, attorneys' offices were never had lighted signs, and now some of them have moved to more retail type locations, but others want the branding up there. Mm-hmm. So the whole, churches used to have churches and schools had very minimal signage. Now they want larger signs. They may want electronic message signs. So,
right.
So that's been, and of course growth in the electronic message signs has been huge in recent years, and the technology has brought the cost down of those a lot. So
one of the things that I know has changed, partly because I was in government some, is you probably got a lot more rules than there used to be about signage.
Yes, we do.
Well, tell me about. Okay. Tell me how they impact you.
Of course, we'll deal with a number of different levels of government as far as the sign ordinances. Locally, we have, of course, the Wichita City ordinance. There's a Sedgwick County ordinance, and all the outlying communities will have their own ordinances. Mm-hmm. So we may deal with a lot of those. Some of those are a lot more restrictive than others. So it just varies depending on who the customer is as to whether it's going to be an easy, whether they'll be able to have the signs they want or whether they'll be limited by the ordinances to something different. So,
well, there are places in the world where that's a really interesting issue. If you go to Quebec in Canada, the signs have to be, anything in French has to be larger than the English.
Okay.
And some of the American companies, like a Dunkin' Donuts, had a terrible time because they didn't want to use that name there. Yeah. And it was, I think they had 22 people in Montreal whose job was to go around and check signs.
Right.
I don't think we have that many.
No, we don't.
In Wichita.
Generally, the regulations we deal with are going to deal with the size, placement, spacing, and lighting. Would be, I generally think of any of the ordinances are going to try to be content neutral, because when you start trying to regulate content, you have, is it Fifth Amendment or what's First Amendment, free speech rights.
First Amendment.
So, okay.
And there are also now historical things, and that tends to impact too, does it not? On occasion, I think it did.
On occasion, there are
a sign we had on our building. We had to prove, in fact, that there had been signs there in the past.
There have been. One of the more notable things in Wichita, there are special regulations for Old Town and special approval processes need to happen. But there's also regulations for special regulations for buildings that are on historic registers.
Okay. Is the speed reasonable on those, the approvals? Or are there certain ones that are more difficult?
It has gotten better.
Okay.
In Wichita several years ago, most of those applications had to go to a board for a hearing. Now, a lot of this, they have more definite guidelines, and a lot of those can be approved at staff level and not have to go to a board. And the main problem with a board is having to go before a board is usually you have to get on an agenda, and you can
wait for the meeting.
You wait for the meeting, and if there's not a quorum there, you wait another month. So those things can happen.
All right, we'll end on that happy note, and we'll be back in just a second with Wichita's Biz That Is. Welcome back to Wichita's Biz That Is. I'm Tim Witzman, our guest today, John Lay. John, I know you've got some changes coming up in the business. Why don't you tell us about those?
Yes, we do. We have just recently purchased a franchise, which will be transferring our service and repair business over. Will be now known as Yesco Sign and Lighting Services of Wichita. Yesco is a family-owned company. Yesco stands for Young Electric Sign Company. They're Salt Lake City based. They're in a lot of the western states, and they developed a system for their own use, and then decided to franchise it to other companies in other parts of the country that help you manage and grow service and repair business. So we're looking forward to that. We have one of our trucks that, rather than now saying is a red truck with Yesco logos on it, rather than the white truck with George Lay Signs logos.
Okay.
So,
but John Lay's going to be running both those.
well, I have someone who'll be managing that part of it.
Oh, the other one. Okay.
But I'll be, I'm sure, involved with it. So I hope to have someone else doing most of the daily operations for it.
Tell me the pleasures and the pains of owning a business. What do you like? What's fun? And I know what's not fun, because John, an employee, was injured earlier this morning, and his mind is a bit divided, I think, as he's trying to be concerned with that.
Oh, I think part of the fun of it is there's a competitive side where you're wanting to win the business.
I'm with you. I'm from Indiana.
Okay.
Got to do a high school. All right.
But in a lot of cases, we're competing with other companies. We want to have the best proposal. We want to win the job, and then we want to get it done on time, and we want to please our customers. So,
well, you don't have any. Some of the businesses in town, their clientele is dominated by a certain type of industry, or just a few. Yours is pretty broad, I would think.
Yes, and a lot more so than it was in past years.
Okay.
So, we do have a pretty broad group of customers. And with the fact that we're doing both building signs, installing, and doing repairs, as well as having the billboards, if the economy turns down, one part of the business goes down, another part can usually pick up some of the slack. Now, we did have things, we had our sales take a dive and had to reduce our employment back in 2009 and 10, but we're back coming back up on that.
All right. What's not fun? Being a business owner. What do you not like?
Well,
filling out paperwork for
government,
that kind of thing?
Regulatory stuff is always difficult.
By the way, that's the number one issue for small businesses. Regulations.
But we also had an example of that. We were doing a job for a large national company for one of their manufacturing plants outside of Wichita, and it's like we've won the work. And now here's about 16 pages of forms you need to fill out so we can have you work on our property. And it gets discouraging. I often say it's for companies that have too many lawyers on staff, and we end up with stacks and stacks of paperwork, and we have to turn in a lot of documents in order to do the work. And in this case, it was about probably took 3 or 4 hours of staff time to go through and gather all the documents just to be able to work on their premises.
Yeah, we had Pioneer Balloon on one time, and I think they spend about $150,000 a year on just regulatory compliance.
Right. And that's
before you actually make anything for anybody or produce any value.
It's difficult for a small business.
It is.
At what point are you large enough to have a staff person who does nothing but compliance? So, and that's something I don't look forward to. And that's a part of the business that I'm sure my dad would have just had fits with. He just would have said, it's time to hang it up. If I have to deal with all this paperwork. So,
how about some advice for people who are thinking of starting a business? What have you learned? What would you like to have known when you started out that you know now?
Oh. Just be ready to work. Be ready to work hard. Realize that things aren't going to always go the way you plan for them to. There will be times when it's the greatest place on earth to be, and there's times that you just can't wait to get out of there.
And think, why don't I just have an hourly paycheck?
Yeah. Can't I just go home and let it be someone else's problem? So.
Yeah. Well, I've had someone on this show, who said when he first opened his business, he had depression.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, lay on the couch for hours and needed some help.
And I've been very fortunate in that when I came into the business, it was well established. We were stable, had been managed the money well through the years, so I've never dealt with the worry of where's the money going to come from for the next payroll. Mm-hmm. Never had the worry of how are we going to pay the bills. We've always been able to handle that. There have been some anxious moments when all of a sudden you realize that after you pay all these bills, there's not much left in the bank, and when's we got to collect some money. So there's always some anxious moments. But all right, I've been very fortunate.
We've only got a minute or less than that left. Let me ask, of all the things that have happened or that you've done, what was the most fun? What have you had the most fun doing?
Probably one of the most fun things. 30 years ago, we bought a group of billboards from another company, and they had been neglected for a number of years, and it was, I just had my dad turned it over to me to figure out how to set it up and run it, and it was just a great time. We had a lot of demand for our services, and able to go out and build a lot of business up in a short period of time.
Good.
So that was a lot of fun.
It's fun to end on a good note.
Okay.
Thanks for being with us, John, and we'll see you next week with Wichita's Biz That Is.